Coming up, the New York Football Giants continue their injury list of woes, but we pull back and take a high-level view at GM Joe Schoen. Has he put this team in a position to be successful on the field, and how long do we wait to start to judge the man at the top? Yes, sir. It is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where we are your host over here, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New Jersey Devils and Devils Puck Luck Podcast. It's season kickoff tonight for them, or puck drop, whichever you prefer, with Danny McDonough, and also the Brooklyn Nets and the Locked On Nets podcast with Doug Norrie. He is the season generational ticket holder, the pulse of the New York Football Giants fan base. Mr. Andrew Makowitz, how are we, sir, on a Thursday?
Great, Adam. Yesterday, son's birthday, 4 years
Hello.
old. Shout out to Shake Shack. We ordered a little Shake Shack. Everyone got some burgers and French fries. It was a great day of not thinking about the New York Football Giants.
Any day is a great day not to think about the New York Football Giants. Told you at the top there, we're going to get into a bit of a high-level view. I think people are starting to talk about this now, as this season may or may not be going fully off the rails. And on the back end, we will look at Thursday Night Football, right? We got a little Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs. That's exciting. AFC, Russell Wilson. But before we do, man, we talk about the New York Football Giants. It's funny, man. 24 hours ago, it's Daniel Jones. Well, it's a neck injury. Not going to go into details. Brian Daboll, not going to go into details. No one's going to go into details, but feeling good. The goal is to go out there and play on Sunday. He's not going out there and playing on Sunday. It's going to be Tyrod Taylor. We talked about this after the game last week. It just seemed impossible that a player who 2 years ago had a neck injury that cost him 6 games and was career threatening, at least, was all of a sudden going to get himself back out there on the field as a 15-point dog against the Buffalo Bills.
Well, there's a lot of information coming out, especially on social media right now. The one thing to keep in mind is Daniel Jones has not been officially ruled out yet. There's been a few different Twitter handles and media reports that have ruled him out and said things like we've signed Carson Wentz to the practice squad, which are just unequivocally true. But the way that Brian Daboll and this team has operated with injuries is people that are day to day are more like week to week, and people that are week to week probably should have gone on IR at some point, Saquon Barkley. And so I think we're reading all the tea leaves. Daniel Jones didn't participate in practice. They said he's a little bit sore in the neck. That's never a good thing, knowing he already had one neck injury. It's unlikely that Daniel Jones is going to be out there, but they haven't ruled him out yet. I would be surprised to see him there on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I haven't been ruled out of the NFL draft, but it's pretty unlikely. I just, by the way, man, if you were going to do this, and that's what we want to, we're going to get into after we hit the injury list, what does that say about the way you're treating, in theory, from an internal perspective for the Giants, the guy that you consider to be your franchise quarterback? Before we do that, Andy, injuries. Hit us with the laundry list now that is ever growing for the New York Football Giants in terms of players that at a minimum are questionable going into Sunday's game.
Over half of the starters for the Giants are on the injury report, Adam, and we're like not even a third of the way through the season, right? And some of them are bigger injuries than others. We know Saquon Barkley's out. So let's go through the people that did not participate in practice.
Yes.
And I'll take one long breath because it's going to take quite a while to go through this. Daniel Jones, quarterback, did not participate. Micah McFadden, Azeez Ojulari, Matt Pert, Wan'Dale Robinson, John Michael Schmitz, Andrew Thomas, and Darren Waller all did not participate in practice on Wednesday. That's just the people that didn't get on the field. Then you have the limited participants, guys like Deonte Banks, Saquon Barkley, Gary Brightwell, Cordell Flott, Shane Lemieux, and offensive lineman Marcus McKeithen. Adam, that is like 12, 13, that's 14 guys.
That's 14 players.
Yeah, it's an insane list. What is your initial thought about how many guys are on the injury report?
I mean, listen, we know that you can be tongue-in-cheek about this stuff and play a little bit coy. I don't think that that's a necessity for the Giants taking on the Buffalo Bills on the road this week. It's funny, man. We talk about this in different ways in the past couple of seasons, the turf and those type of things. This doesn't seem related to the field causing these injuries because you usually see those in game time and watching them happen with your own eyes. But it's just, I don't know. It's the rollover effect here. Azeez Ojulari is kind of like the the poster boy for this type of thing, right? Consistently showing up on injury reports. Andrew Thomas, these are guys that have already been injured this season before this list came out. You think about him and you say, yeah, he's a guy that has some injury concerns now in his career. And even Darren Waller, right? That was the biggest question mark when you trade for him is, are we getting a guy that's going to be able to be healthy? He's nursing the groin, same type of, he said that it was a maintenance day. This was kind of in the plan anyway. So you'd like to, on a lot of these guys, buy into the idea that they're more than likely going to be ready to play and it's just precautionary. But at a minimum, you're still talking about you're going to be missing 4 or 5 starters easily. And then also your depth pieces. So who's playing? We already saw it last week. We're pulling in guys from the practice squad to start at center and on the offensive line.
John Michael Schmitz didn't participate. Andrew Thomas didn't participate. Matt Pert didn't participate. That is 3 offensive linemen. Then you had Lemieux and McKeithen, limited participation. You have 5 or 6 offensive linemen that are question marks going into this. We're pulling guys off the practice squad. Justin Pugh is getting practice reps. That's the biggest question is we don't really know where the offensive line is going to be outside of Daniel Jones, right?
Yeah, and so do you perceive that? Yeah, the offensive line is an absolute mess, and who knows? Maybe Justin Pugh, it's a little bit of stability. I even have like you, somebody has to play, so you need to sign guys to the practice squad and see who can be brought up. But do you? So my fundamental question is this the team kind of waving the white flag on the season, or just waving the white flag on this week against Buffalo on the road where you're a massive underdog? Because all these guys, man, you're going to list them, and we'll know officially on Sunday. But if you list all these guys, it just feels like Saquon Barkley's been like, maybe he can return for the last 2 weeks, and now it's into the third week. Is it just the Giants saying, like, yeah, this is the way we're going? If you're a high profile guy and you had a legitimate injury that's taken a few weeks, it's maybe going to take you a few more weeks. Because what's the point of pushing the pressure button here on a roster and a team that, I mean, listen, man, they might be. They might be the worst team in the NFL. Like results oriented business, they may be the worst team in the NFL right now.
Listen, as a contrast, the Buffalo Bills have 7 people that are on their injury report, but they did lose guys like Matt Milano and others to bigger, larger
Yeah.
injuries that look like they could be out for the season. So it's not like other teams don't have injuries. Adam,
No,
I won't say that it's waving the white flag. Who knows? Of the 14 guys, 10 or 11 of them could potentially get out there and play for the Giants. So it
sure.
could just be some maintenance time to get them up to speed. But here's the thing. So we reached out to Art Stapleton, a beat writer for the Giants, NJ.com, usually plugged in with the team. Just wanted to have a conversation with him about, okay, so like, does it even make sense to put Daniel
Right.
Jones out there if he can go, considering the Giants are 15-point underdogs on the road in prime time with all these injuries, decimated offensive line against a team that leads the league in sacks? And the answer from Art Stapleton was unequivocally, if he's healthy, he plays, end of discussion. And for me, it feels a little bit more nuanced than that, Adam. But I want to get your take on it. Like, are you the same way that Art is? Like, he's getting paid $40 million a year. If he's healthy, he needs to be out there for every single snap. Or is there more to this?
I listen. I think that by NFL standards, if you're healthy, you play. That is true, right? And because if every team treated it like this, well, then there'd be a dozen quarterbacks every single year that if they had a little tweak, didn't go out there and play because we're not going to the playoffs, we're not competing for a championship. Why risk it, right? And especially when it comes to franchise guys. By the way, maybe Anthony Richardson falls underneath this category for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know, but again, when you're talking about a neck, I just it would seem like to use an office Dwight Schrute quote, malfeasance for malfeasance's sake. Like what that can't be true. That cannot be true. And if you think that he is your franchise guy by the organizational standard, then you cannot. It would be malpractice to say, well, if you're healthy enough to go, we're going to put you out here. No, because if you take the big picture about the season and you think you still can compete and win football games, then at some point, while you don't want to tell the fan base this, yeah, we're going to punt against the Buffalo Bills here and hope that we get Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Andrew Thomas healthy and back for games that we really believe we can go out and compete in and win.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we posed the question to R2 is because it's like, okay, there's also a lot of tailwind into people, harping on Daniel Jones's poor play. Everyone kind of comparing and contrasting how much responsibility does Daniel Jones face versus the offensive line. A better quarterback could do more things. He's not the answer. Wouldn't it be smart for the Giants to sit Daniel Jones regardless and be precautionary with his neck injury. And guess what? Have Tyrod Taylor out there and say, what does it look like? And let's maybe get some answers to some of these questions. Because guess what? If he starts slinging the ball around the field and looks more mobile and is avoiding sacks, and the Giants put up 24 points, honestly, that would be eye opening to me. It really would. I would turn
Yeah.
around and say, wow, a lot of the assumptions that I have made are incorrect. And maybe it is falling more of the percentage on Daniel Jones than on the offensive line. That's kind of like, not only are you resting Daniel Jones, but you're also getting a couple of answers to questions that are being asked elsewhere.
Yeah, I actually remember I said this last week. It wasn't comparing Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor as, oh, who's the better quarterback or who's the more viable quarterback for your franchise. But Tyrod Taylor is more mobile within the pocket. He's a shiftier player. He can really run and scramble around. Daniel Jones is a running quarterback that can use his legs and has great straight line speed to pick up chunks of yards. We know it's a part of his repertoire. But to your point, if you put Tyrod Taylor out, I'm like, dude, you could lose this game 40-0. But if Tyrod Taylor extended plays towards the sideline and found some of these receivers, when you go look at the all 22 and you see times when it's, well, Daniel Jones, he had the second or two to throw it there, and Wan'Dale Robinson is in the flat looking for the first down, or you have Darren Waller, or you have Darius Slayton, right? If you just see a handful of those instances, I think to your point, it would be okay, well, maybe there is at least something here that Daniel Jones is not as effectively processing what he's seeing on the field as he should be. The offensive line is bad. The weapons aren't good enough. This team is terrible. But also, Daniel Jones can be labeled as a part of the problem this season. And you can isolate it that way as well.
Or we see Tyrod Taylor running from his life,
Absolutely
seven,
destroyed.
8, 9 sacks against him, no time to
Right.
throw, 2 picks, a fumble recovery for a touchdown. The Giants
Yeah.
lose 37-3, and everyone can kind of sit back and say, okay, like maybe you could kind of interchange a few different quarterbacks, and there's probably another problem that we have to address, right?
Well, and by the way, though, and the downside of that, which is fine, like the result would be the result, would be like, but you wouldn't learn anything more about Daniel Jones, right? Like Tyrod Taylor getting his butt kicked, you just be like, yeah, well, he's a 33-year-old backup quarterback. He got his butt kicked. Like, of course, we won't know anything more concrete about what Daniel Jones' ceiling should be. And maybe if anything, you would say, well, he's on par. But like, it didn't look if it doesn't look any better or worse, it looks the same. Then it's like, okay, at least you would bring down Daniel Jones, right? From a tier of saying, well, he's a top 12 quarterback in the league when everyone is healthy and things are working well. You'd say, no, he's a serviceable starter, but he's not going to be a needle mover when things aren't right.
Yeah, it would accentuate what the actual biggest problem is. It
Yes.
doesn't
Yes.
eliminate other problems
Yeah.
that you have, whether it's Daniel Jones playing better or people catching the ball or developing a run game. But Adam, the problem, my hypothesis is that the offensive line doesn't allow any quarterback really to do much, and that's why
Yeah.
it would be eye opening if Tyrod Taylor can move down the field. But ultimately, the depth across the offensive line just is not there right now, and it's obviously through a whole host of injuries, but it does feel a little bit like, I don't know, some of these guys were drafted here over the last few years, and maybe they're not progressing the way that they should be as well.
Last footnote that I asked people over on Twitter was Tyrod Taylor leads the Giants to a win over the Bills on Sunday. And what do we think? What do we feel? Or what happens? What happens if that occurs? And most of the responses were, well, I wake up from the dream that I was having that the Giants would
Yep.
actually go out and do that. Let's talk about, though, Andy mentioned it there. Draft classes, going even back to the Dave Gettleman era. Where's the depth been on this roster? And where is the responsibility lie when we look at Joe Schoen? In Joe Schoen we trust, but how much should we hold on to that? Okay, so you mentioned it there, Andy. The depth that has been an issue here, and we're going to throw up a couple of things. If you're over on YouTube, if you're listening on the pod, just tune in the ears, dial them up, and we're going to run down what was where we started in the Joe Schoen era, what he had on the docket, and then what he's done in the first 2 years of his GM role with the New York Football Giants. So we throw it up, and everyone's familiar with these. Going back to 2020, right? Now we know Andrew Thomas. He's a hit as long as he's healthy. He's a hit. Xavier McKinney, yes, a quality player in this league, but will he be a part of this team going forward? After that, Andrew, we're talking about Matt Parrott, Darnay Holmes, Shane Lemieux, Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin, and then into some guys that are no longer on this roster already in Brunson, Williamson, and Crowder. And those are back end of the draft guys. But there are some depth players here. Cam Brown, like Carter Coughlin, right? They stuck around. That was not great. So let's just put it that way. After your first round pick and maybe your high second, who are supposed to be hits for this team.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, listen, Andrew Thomas ended up being arguably the best offensive tackle of that draft. If he can stay healthy,
Mhm.
he is a Pro Bowl, almost all pro caliber left tackle. But we talk about this depth. You mentioned guys like Matt Pert, third round draft pick number 99. He was in the top 100 picks.
Your
He
top
doesn't
100.
even look like he can be the swing tackle for this team. And he was drafted in 2020. Adam, it's not like he's a rookie and we're trying to figure it out. Like, he's been here for years and years
Yeah.
and years, and he still can't, in a pinch, be the guy. And we've seen what happens with Shane Lemieux. We know that Darnay Holmes was a potential cut candidate. And when you start looking at the depth, it's like, I know we're talking about third to seventh round picks, but that's really where you want guys to be able to either fill in or assume like some kind of prominent role after a few years in the system, right?
Oh, of course. And when you dial it up into 2021, before we turn our attention to the Joe Schoen era, you see Rodarius Williams, Andy's favorite. He finally succumbed to the roster cuts this past off season. But as you work your way up the list, the next three guys in Gary Brightwell, Ellerson Smith, Aaron Robinson, they're all still on this roster. Their roles
Oh,
are not significant, though we
Ellerson
go ahead.
Smith just
Oh, Ellerson Smith
signed.
is not. Yeah.
He just signed to the New York Jets practice squad yesterday. First time I've heard his name in quite some time, Adam. I couldn't pick him out of a lineup if you asked because he was always injured. Like, I don't even know like what he would look like without a face mask.
He was a long and lean fella. That's all I could say for sure. And then Aaron Robinson, who obviously has had the injuries, right? And injuries plagued Ellerson Smith's opportunity with the Giants as well. Then you get up to the top two guys. Now, in Azeez Ojulari, we know talented player, but cannot stay healthy, right? Cannot stay healthy and on the field. That's at least a concern. And then Kadarius Toney, who, as we turn our attention over in just 1 second to Joe Schoen's era, we saw him, right? What was he doing? Converting that into a Darren Waller, and then you get some draft capital. Okay, great. The question still becomes, though, was that the right thing to do? Getting off of Kadarius Toney might have been the right answer no matter what, but was it converting that into an older, quality when healthy, but injury riddled player in Darren Waller? Was that the right decision for Joe Schoen as he rolled into the second year of his reign as the GM? Flip the script to his. Now, this is where I think it's interesting because, as we all know, you need at least 3 years to really evaluate a draft class. But in the first 2 years, you can start to get a sense of where you think these guys are going. Darian Beavers, I, I'm hurt, right? We all know how I felt about this kid, and he just did not look the part. Maybe he comes back after really fully recovering. But as we work up the list, Andy, Marcus McCathan, DJ Davidson, Micah McFadden, Dane Belton, Daniel Bellinger, Cordell Flott, Joshua Zudu, Wandale Robinson, Evan Neal, and then obviously Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, you can walk us through this list here for yourself about where you stand perceptually on all of these players, even understanding that some of them are mid and late round picks.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. We understand that some of these are fifth round picks. You mentioned McCaven, Davidson, McFadden, all fifth round picks. So there's different expectations that come with different selections in the draft. And what you start looking at as you go down the list is like, who is exceeding the expectations of where
Yeah.
they were drafted, Adam? That's what I keep going to. Like, Daniel Bellinger is wide receiver number 2. He's drafted in the fourth round. That seems to be about where you would draft a second a second tight end, right? Dane Belton is a rotational safety right now. We both think that he has promise longer term, but his expectations of being a rotational safety out of the fourth round kind of there. When you
Yeah.
move up into the third round and you have guys like Flott and Azudu who can't start when kind of third round draft picks should be contributing on a consistent basis. And then you have Wandale Robinson in the second round, where I had questions about his size and his injury history.
Yeah.
Came to the forefront last year when he was ruled out for the year. And then you look at the picks that you absolutely have to hit on, which are top 10 picks in the NFL. And that's Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau. And Evan Neal has struggled mightily to the point where people are thinking about he should move to guard. And
Yeah.
Thibodeau had 4 sacks. He looks like he still has an opportunity to maybe develop into it. But you have to be, if you're a top 5 pick, you have to be making a huge contribution and huge difference to this team. We just haven't seen it yet from that draft class.
Yeah, 100%. And again, and these guys Kayvon Thibodeau, I think, has shown a little bit of some of these things, right? Last year, the game against the Commanders. This year, couple of moments, especially in recent weeks where he's looked better. But I think one of the things we'd say, at least right now, relative to other players that are high draft picks on other teams, he has not at least popped the way several top 10 talents do, where within the first season, let alone the first 2 seasons, you look at him, you say, oh, yeah, this guy is going to be a stud. And that's what's attached to being drafted that high. And we said this earlier in the week about when you're Joe Schoen and you say, I don't want to miss on Thibodeau and I'll take whichever tackle is there. Okay, you took whichever tackle was there, and it may turn out that he's actually a guard for you. So there are concerns there. And I'll even mention with Cordell Flott, who I like. And again, these aren't referendums on them, but I think it is the note about Joe Schoen and about what it is to be a GM. And everybody does this. When the draft picks get made, you look at the player, you think about the fit, and you go, okay, I like this kid. He can really be somebody. But as weeks and years go by, you start to reevaluate. We said in the offseason, wow, Trey Hawkins came out of nowhere. What a find for the Giants. We're going to get into this recent draft class. But then if you think about it in the sense of, so now we're going to take Adoree Jackson, we're going to play him at the slot, and he's going to follow the best player around. But Cordell Flott, the 3rd-round pick, doesn't have a role on this team right now in the top 3 cornerback room. That's concerning. And we've seen flashes from some of these guys. So this is by no way a referendum that they've all been busts or something. But it's just we haven't gotten as much confirmation as we would like. And when we look into this most recent draft class, which is the hardest one to evaluate, obviously, we talk about, I just mentioned Trey Hawkins there, a late round guy. Now he's been pulled in and out of the lineup, and that shouldn't be all too surprising given he was a 6th-round pick. But Jordan Riley certainly has some promise. Okay, great. Javarius Owens, okay, great. Those are the back end guys. Eric Gray being taken in the 5th round as a running back. You at least put some attention on him. He's starting to get some reps as Barkley has been out. Jalen Hyatt, JMS, and Deontay Banks. Right now, you'd say we're waiting for confirmation on Jalen Hyatt. We think he can be really good, but we're not getting the reps from him. And then JMS, I think the only concern here is health. Have we once again walked ourselves into a pool of players that cannot stay on the field?
Yeah, and you mentioned Deontay Banks. He looks like he can be the part. He is the first round pick that you're like, man, we need to hit on
Yes.
him or else
Yes.
things are going to be, troublesome. And we say, like, give it time, figure out if these players can play. Like, you look at the Eagles drafting Jalen Carter in this draft, and he's leading defensive tackles in pressure rate up the middle in the entire NFL. Like, he's wrecking games. You look at Puka Nakua, wide receiver for the Rams, drafted in like the 5th round. He's top 5 in receiving yards and receptions on the year. Like, yes, it can take time for players to develop, but there are certain players where it pops off the screen where you're like, oh yeah, he's going to be a problem for the rest of the NFL for the remainder. We just don't know. Like you said, question marks with Jalen Hyatt and others. We just don't know if the Giants have those pieces in place. We talked about depth before, but do you have those front end starters that you draft in the 2nd and 3rd round? Are they the ones that are maturing into players that we can count on?
And that's really the concern here, less about if these guys are going to develop. And one of the big things, as you mentioned, the Eagles as being a great example. Well, when you're on a more talented team, it's easier, especially for young players to develop, right? And to flash because you're surrounded by tremendous talent. But even that brings it back to Joe Schoen in the sense of, well, should you, even if Deontay Banks is a hit at the cornerback spot, and you needed that. But when you look at the offensive line and you see how much that could be hampering your ability to get guys progressing and to see how Jalen Hyatt can look this year and Wan'Dale Robinson, right? It begs the question. I know you've invested a lot. Like, you have invested a lot. Should you have invested even more, right? And it also brings up the interesting question, I think, when it comes to Schoen about his decisions in free agency. Very limited draft capital. We understand that. But 2 years ago, you went and got Mark Glowinski. That was a massive miss, and it did not help solve anything. It was a neutral Band-Aid last year and has been a mess. You don't bring back Tyree Phillips. That's been speculated about too with the state of this line. Then you turn around and you make the trade for Darren Waller. Okay, again, I'll say it again. Where else might you have converted a Kadarius Toney and capital that you turned him into an offensive lineman, into someone that could help protect? It's not that the player isn't sexy and isn't talented. Is it the best, smartest move? Paris Campbell, again, you spend money on a player that we get it. If he's healthy and on the field, he certainly gives you a lot of opportunities to be successful. But was it the smartest allocation of money? And you had done this the other day. I'm not going to put you on the spot with it. I'm going to try to pull it up myself in the background. There were guys that signed for not insane rates when it comes to offensive linemen, when it comes to even wide receivers, even positional players, that I just do wonder if you could have gone back and looked at it again. Would you sit here as the Giants and say there are guys that sign with the Chargers on the offensive line? We have I was going to say outside linebacker, excuse me, is what I want to touch on too with the Jacksonville Jaguars. You have so many names here, inside linebackers as well, that sign with Detroit for, $5 to $6 million a year. It's a hard equation to process. But I do come back to Darren Waller may be one of the more consistent receivers on this team this year, but it hasn't mattered. It hasn't mattered about results. And it's just, I'm very curious, man. The rest of this season and next off season is going to be a big one for Joe Schoen.
Adam, Joe
Yes.
Schoen last draft drafted 3 offensive linemen, one in the top 10, and all 3 still have question marks 12 to 18 months later, and that's really the
Yeah.
challenge. It's not the fact that they didn't allocate assets to the offensive line. It's that we're questioning whether the allocation was to the
Yeah.
right people or the right situation, given that, we hope JMS is going to be healthy the rest of his career and solidifies the center. But those guard positions through the draft and free agency have not looked great. And guess what? Andrew Thomas was a Dave Gettleman pick. Evan Neal was a Joe Schoen pick, and it's not looking great. The allocation is really the challenge. It's not that we think Joe Schoen has been avoiding addressing the
Sure.
offensive line.
Sure.
It's just,
That's right.
have we done it the right way? And it still feels like there's question marks. Even more than question marks, it feels like 30 sacks given up so far in the season, leading the NFL, tells me that we really have a problem.
100%. So it's going to be something that I think is discussed and dissected for the rest of this season, especially when you see the play on the field. And then we'll talk about it in the offseason when big decisions have to get made. But you made a very astute point when it comes to it. It's not about that Joe Schoen isn't trying to address the issue. It's whether or not he's doing it correctly. And that's where you would go back and you could talk about Ikwunu for the Carolina Panthers, who was taken just ahead of the Giants. Hey, that means that maybe Thibodeau could have been that pick instead. And you can even go back and look at Charles Cross, who's playing out with the Seattle Seahawks. And you can think about these other players in and around there, even all the way down into the middle of that first round in that draft class. Remember, we did ask, and this is a part that Joe Schoen can't control. Were people willing to trade up? Could you have gotten more and maybe played in different areas of the first and second rounds to fill out this roster? Okay. That was fun. This is what we're doing now. This is what the New York Football Giants season is. It's not about the football. So we will, of course, be back in tomorrow talking about the game against the Bills, expectations, things that we want to see. And we're going to do something different with our pick'ems on Friday, which will be looking at the NFC East, because as Andy pointed out, a lot of interesting matchups that maybe we can learn something about the state of our division, even beyond the Giants. But before we get out the door, Andy, Thursday night football. We've got a meeting between the Denver Broncos for whatever they are, and the Kansas City Chiefs. When we talk about this game, we're seeing a team in the Broncos visiting Kansas City getting 10.5 right now. The money line says plus 430. The over under says 46.5. Feel free, Andy, to do that thing where you use your composite website and it gives you the accurate, but it really throws things off and you end up losing that no matter what. That's referencing the Patriots pick from a week ago.
Oh, I mean, forget about the Patriots pick. I never want to talk about that one.
Yeah.
Blow that one up into the oblivion at this point.
Yeah.
I thought that they would rebound and Belichick would look good, and instead they throw up a goose egg. Absolutely horrific. Listen, I mean,
That
Adam.
-1 didn't help.
Yeah, I don't think it factored in.
Yeah.
Listen, Travis Kelsey is listed as questionable for this game. Obviously,
Yes.
we saw what the Chiefs look like when he isn't there. It is a different offense. It looks different, and we're starting to see the Lions are a team that is for real. So it was a formidable matchup. Adam, all you got to do is follow Taylor Swift. 10 hours
Take that?
ago, 10 hours ago, Taylor Swift set to attend Thursday night football in Kansas City to watch the game. You think
Wow.
she's going to the Thursday night game to watch the Broncos if Travis Kelsey isn't suiting up? I
Mhm.
highly doubt that. I believe Kelsey's going to be there. Listen, the Broncos, funnily enough, this year it's not on Russell Wilson. Like, he's not the biggest problem they have. The biggest problem they have is their defense. They cannot stop a nosebleed in Denver. The Broncos are putting up 26 points per game on offense. Like, that should be enough to win you a few games. But if Travis Kelsey's out there and you have Patrick Mahomes against one of the worst defenses in the league, I just don't see how there's a way that you can confidently say Denver's the side of the play.
No, and I mean, listen, it's interesting with the 46.5 over under. I mean, what are they suggesting? Because one of the things I think everyone we don't forget, but it's easy to look past. Like Kansas City has a good defense. Like that's one thing that they've done a really nice job is providing strength on that side of the ball because Patrick Mahomes in the offense, they get a little sluggish. They had to incorporate some new weapons. Like this is what good deep playoff teams need to do is know we can still win football games while we figure some things out. So that's going to be interesting when you talk about the Broncos, who got 21 points off a very good Jets defense, but gave up 31. Even if Travis Kelce wasn't playing in this game, I'd be hard pressed to take them. The real question is, though, Andy, are you going to lay the 10.5 points with the Kansas City Chiefs? I'll allow you to have first pick here. Are you going to lay that 10.5 at home? Or are you going to take those points and say, listen, there's a little backdoor cover opportunity here for the Broncos?
Listen, every Thursday night game feels
Yes,
like it goes off the rails real fast. Like
that's right.
something happens, there's a fluke play, a guy's not healthy or whatever it is. And it feels like you live in like an alternate universe when you watch Thursday night football games. I don't know if that's just me, but like, do you feel that, Adam? Like,
Of course, because it's Thursday Night Football and they're making everyone play on short weeks, so no one's prepared. You got Travis Kelce trying to play. You should have 2 more days to be healthy. Of course, it's a total hodgepodge. The NFL's a mess.
it feels like Thursday, weird things happen. You would want to take the under. I just can't do it with how bad the Broncos defense is. I kind of look at this game. I would lay the points with the
Okay.
Chiefs at home. I think the Broncos will be able to score a few points. I think the Chiefs will score a lot of points. So
Okay.
my final score in this game is 34-20. So give me
Mm.
the over, give me the Chiefs to beat the Broncos by about 14.
Give me yeah, and then let's just have some fun. I'll take the I'm gonna I guess I have to take the over because you can't not take the over again with the Chiefs in this matchup.
No, but it's Thursday
I'll
night
take the
football, the
over.
under, miscues. Adam, go with the hard-nosed 13-17 game. Take the under, take the Broncos. I know you want to do it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly right. I'll take the over, but you know what? Let's have some fun. I'm going to take the Denver Broncos. Give me the 10.5, and let's call this a 33-23 game. Maybe a couple of field goals get sprinkled in there early. Maybe it takes a quarter or two for the Kansas City Chiefs offense to get rolling, and a I'm talking total garbage time touchdown for the Denver Broncos that gives me that backdoor cover. Guys, we'll be back in tomorrow talking about the matchup with the Buffalo Bills. We'll highlight who's injured for them, as Andy mentioned at the top here. And then we're really going to talk about some of those fantasy plays, though. Let's just see where we can maybe make some money as the Giants are going in the wrong direction. And as I said, pick'ems inside the NFC East division. We'll take a look at some of those matchups and maybe dissect how good are the Cowboys and Eagles really, and the Commanders, by the way. I feel like we tried to overlook them as everyone does. Guess what? At a minimum, they're better than us. But until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand you, the people, know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.